welcome to Newman University Church. Today I'm going to be giving you a brief tour of this beautiful facility. But before we begin and go into the church, I just want to situate why this church is here in the first place. If you see the front of the church, you'll see that we have a very small opening onto St. Stephen's Green. When the Catholic University of Ireland was being built, they purchased a few homes along here, including the beautiful house right to our immediate right, left looking at the building, which is now the Museum of Literature of Ireland, Mali. But it was the original Catholic university. But in building the university, Newman really knew that he had to have a church. He needed to have a well-decorated chapel. And he looked about for several different locations. They were renting some houses on Harcourt Street, which is immediately down to our left. And they were using those for residences. He thought he was going to be able to build his church there. But the negotiations fell through with the landlord that he was going to buy the property from, and he had just purchased the house immediately to the front of the church, number 87. What he had was this magnificent back garden. For those of us from the United States, our backyard. Georgian properties were built in long, narrow pieces of land, with the house built often at one end. And so this house, like many of them, had this very long back garden. As soon as he had made the deal, he started planning construction even before he had built the church, even before he had been able to purchase the property. The contours of the church fit entirely into the contours of the back garden. Where we are now, called the atrium, was simply the alleyway that ran beside the house. And the church is 37 feet wide, 100 feet long. It is the contours of the back garden of number 87 St. Stephen's Green. And once you leave the atrium, which is the long passageway that used to be the alleyway, you come into this area. Both of that area and this area were traditionally quite dark, mostly for the lack of windows. We have much better modern lighting. Into this area, it's low-ceilinged, lots of pillars under the gallery. The gallery is what we now use as the choir loft. But it could seat up to 100 people in its day, and it provided greater seating in this church, which was built to be used both as a church and truly as a meeting hall, assembly hall for significant lectures and talks given at the university. What's most important about this back area is actually the capitals on top of the pillars. Each of these pillars are made from marble, harvested here in Ireland. But the capitals are all carved by local craftsmen, none of whom were marble carvers. They were woodworkers. And John Hungerford Pollen, who was the architect and the head of construction, he designed them himself, and he wanted them to be done beautifully but simply. And he found that these workmen were able to do that. What this was called was the area for the Mass of the Pre-Sanctified. So it would have had some screening that came at the final set of pillars before we entered into the church itself. Those wrought iron screens were removed. We now usually fill this with chairs because we need seating for just Sunday Mass. generations of students, mostly from University College Dublin, think of this church as their home. When Catholic University went away, it became the University College Dublin, also situated right here in the neighborhood. We have weddings here all the time of young men and women, often both from families where their parents were married here. This is the church that Newman built. He wanted to have a large barn, as big as he could make it, highly decorated. This was the place that he thought created the atmosphere, was the archetype of what a Catholic university would be. This week we've been talking about, and we'll continue to talk about, his great work, The Idea of a University, and in some ways that was simply the boiled down kind of pure essence of what a university should be. Newman, while having incredibly detailed thoughts about what a university was intent on his university being a Catholic university, a place where religion meets philosophy, that coming together of the intellect. And he thought the church should tell a story. He thought the church should have capacity to be didactic, but mostly it should be beautiful. Newman was not particularly enchanted with, in fact, you could say he quite disliked neo-Gothic architecture. So he used this Romanesque style, the Romanesque basilica, but because the church could only be 37 feet wide, he couldn't have a central nave with a row of pillars and side aisles. And so what we see here reproduced in the church is the image of side aisles. Both walls are lined with fake pillars or pilasters, topped with capitals. And then between them are spaces that make you think that you could move into them. They're topped with lunettes. These were paintings done by John Paulin himself. They represent important saints in the Irish Church. They represent important saints in Catholicism. Here to my left, we see the three big saints of Ireland and Dublin, St. Patrick, St. Bridget, and St. Lawrence O'Toole, who is the patron saint of the city of Dublin. Otherwise, as we go back, we see great teachers in the church and others who represent the history of the intellectual life across Catholicism. As you look behind me to the high altar, you see what is the focal point of the church. This is a work that was completely thought through by Newman, but where we see John Paulin's hand most at work. The whole apse area, this area here with the half dome, is reminiscent of St. Clement's in Rome. It is designed very much after it. Its marble work is similar, as is the half dome. Otherwise, the whole thing is very, very Irish. All the marble in this church come from different parts of Ireland. The capitals of alabaster here in the sanctuary area, this beautiful alabaster communion rail, also come from Ireland. There is a sense that Newman wanted people in the church to tie themselves into the natural history, the natural environment of Ireland, to see that Ireland itself represented the glory of God. In the back altar, especially in the frontal, you see 12 fluorspar crystals that represent the 12 apostles, but they're all different colors from different parts of Ireland. They're also represented, fluorspar, in those small details picked out on the back wall. And those would have picked up candlelight and flickering light, and it would have created a beautiful, beautiful sense. The half dome itself is actually more Flemish. This clearly is something that Paulin would have seen in his time in Europe. And we see the image of the hand of God at the very top. We see the cross of Christ. We see Our Lady, seat of wisdom, seated in the middle. But the rest of it is the growing vine of the church, representing the beauty and the holiness and the pureness of the church surrounding Our Lady, but also the beauty of the created world as symbolized in the birds and the deer and the different wildlife. Sadly, it is not as vibrant as it once was. It's simply painted wood. Someday we hope to restore it a little bit, but not to lose any of its native charm. Up here in front of me, you see the Golden Gallery. It was where the choir originally would have sung from. There was a sense that you would have had the beautiful music of the church dropping down upon the liturgy. It's no longer in use as a gallery for a choir, as our choir now sings in the back. I think the most pointed images that we see in the church today are these bright acrylic painted paintings that replaced about 10 years ago original drawings of paintings that were done by two Frenchmen after some cartoons drawn by Raphael, and they darkened so badly they could not be restored. There's some discussion about whether these are permanent. There's some discussion about whether they're actually good, but they do add a lot of color and a lot of life to the church as we currently know it.